What I remember most vividly about that day isn't the silence that swallowed the room, or the way his eyes locked on the paper like it held a loaded weapon. It's her voice, quiet, unwavering, as though she already knew what was about to unfold. "Page 3 is a trap," she whispered. The conference room felt like it was built to erase warmth. Fluorescent lights buzzed above, bouncing off the glass walls and metal fixtures. Rain tapped steadily on the windows, not loud but constant, a reminder of the world continuing outside while time inside felt suspended. I wasn't supposed to feel anything, that's what I told myself. I was only there to sign a document, to follow through on a promise my mother made before her mind became too tangled with illness to remember her own name. The house, a century-old colonial in Hudson, New York, was to be signed over to my older brother, Elias. Our mother had made it clear in one of her rare lucid moments, "Give it to Elias, he needs it more than you." I nodded when she said that, told her I'd do it, even kissed her forehead like it was just another moment between mother and son, and not the final instruction of someone disappearing inch by inch into a fog she couldn't escape. But that was before Elias showed up. He walked into the law firm's office like he hadn't vanished for 6 years, like he hadn't abandoned me with the hospital bills, the funeral, the unraveling of a woman who couldn't understand why her oldest son never called. He wore a navy jacket that probably cost more than my rent, and his beard was trimmed just enough to look effortless. But his eyes didn't meet mine. I should have said something, anything. But all I did was slide the contract across the table, the pen resting on top like a surrender flag. That's when Miranda, my attorney, leaned in close enough for only me to hear. "Page 3 is a trap." I blinked. She didn't elaborate. Elias picked up the document, his hand steady at first. He flipped to the second page without much thought, then the third. His eyes froze. There it was. The clause Miranda had flagged. A conditional transfer. The house would be his only if he spent 6 consecutive months living there with our mother. No caretakers, no loopholes. His jaw tightened. His thumb hovered over the edge of the paper, and then slowly he looked up. He looked straight at me. For the first time in 6 years, there was something about the way Elias looked at me that made my stomach twist. Not because he was angry or surprised, but because he looked scared. Like he hadn't expected to face anything real today. His lips parted slightly, then closed again. He scanned the rest of the page, flipping back and forth as if he might have misread it. But the clause was clear. Occupancy of no fewer than 180 consecutive days is required for full transfer of ownership. And Miranda had made sure it was legal. He set the papers down slowly, like they might burn through the table. Then he leaned back in the chair, leather creaking, and finally spoke. "What is this?" he asked, voice low, almost cautious. I didn't answer right away. I didn't trust what would come out. There were too many words crowding behind my teeth. 6 years' worth. Some bitter, some exhausted. "She didn't want the house to be just another asset," I said. "She wanted you to come back. For real." He let out a dry breath, not quite a laugh, but close. His fingers drummed once on the table. "And this is how she wants it. A contract. Conditional forgiveness." "No," I said. "She doesn't remember any of this." I added it. That got his attention. His eyes narrowed. "You added it?" I nodded, not hiding it, not apologizing. "She can't remember her own name most days, Elias, but she still asks where you are." That landed harder than I expected. His face didn't change much, but his hand dropped from the table to his lap, like it suddenly weighed too much. "She told me to give you the house," I continued. "And I wanted to. I really did. But then I thought about what it would mean. You signing, disappearing again, and me being the one stuck cleaning up the pieces, like always." Miranda didn't say a word. She just sat there, watching both of us like she was witnessing something sacred and dangerous unfold in real time. Elias stood up, pushed the chair back, slow and deliberate, and started pacing. "I didn't come here for a guilt trip," he muttered. "No, you came here for the house," I replied. He turned to me, eyes sharper now. You think I don't know what this is really about? You want me to feel bad? You want me to crawl back and beg for some kind of redemption? You think I care about redemption? He flinched, just slightly. I want my brother, I said. I want the guy who used to chase me through the cornfields behind the house, the guy who used to play piano for Mom when she couldn't sleep. I don't want this version of you. He said nothing, just stood there, hands on his hips, breathing heavily, and then he sat back down. Didn't touch the paper, didn't speak. Just stared at the floor as if the decision had already begun to break something inside him. The silence that followed was dense. You could hear the rain picking up outside, each drop against the window pane sounding louder than it should have. I stared at Elias, but he kept his eyes fixed on the floor, jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitching. I didn't know if he was trying to hold back anger or tears, maybe both. I didn't write that clause to punish you, I said quietly. I wrote it because I wanted to know if you'd be willing to show up. Not for me, for her. He finally looked at me again. You don't get to talk to me like you know what I've been through. I don't. You're right, I said, keeping my voice steady. Because you never gave me the chance to know, you just left. That word still felt jagged in my mouth. Left. He shifted in his seat, his fingers running along the edge of the table like he needed something to ground him. I had to leave. Why? His eyes flicked toward Miranda, then back to me. Not here. No, I said. Exactly here. This is where you came to take what was left of home. So tell me why you couldn't stay in it. He looked down again, shaking his head. I couldn't watch her fall apart. I exhaled through my nose, bitter. So you left me to do it. He winced. A real, visible reaction. Maybe the first honest one all day. I was 20, Elias. I didn't know how to get a mortgage, how to pay for her medication. I was working nights at the gas station, for God's sake. His voice dropped, barely above a whisper. I know. No, you don't. You don't get to say that. You weren't there. He closed his eyes, pressed the heels of his hands to them like he could block out everything. I couldn't breathe in that house after Dad died. Every hallway felt haunted. So you ran? Yeah, he said, almost choking on it. I ran. The words hung between us, more honest than anything else that had been said. Miranda finally shifted in her seat, glancing at her watch but staying silent. She knew this wasn't just a legal conversation anymore. It hadn't been from the beginning. I leaned back, letting the weight of it settle. 6 months isn't a lifetime, I said. She might not even have that long. But if you want that house, if you want to claim some version of the past, you'll have to sit with her in it. You'll have to remember who we were before everything cracked open. Elias looked out the window for a long time. Then he picked up the pen, held it like it was something foreign. I don't know if I can do this, he said. I didn't answer. I just waited. And in that waiting, something started to shift. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe the first step toward it. He didn't sign. Not that day. Elias held the pen in his hand for almost a full minute, and then, without a word, he set it back down. His fingers lingered on the table, tracing the grain of the wood like it might give him an answer. I watched him the whole time, waiting for something, an apology, an outburst, anything that might explain the weight in his silence. Instead, he stood up. I need time, he said. Miranda nodded, professional and unreadable. I didn't. I just stared at him. You've had 6 years. He looked at me like that stung, but he didn't argue. Maybe because he knew I was right. Still, I watched him walk out without another word. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and just like that I was alone again. Miranda waited a moment, then turned to me. You didn't need to do it like that, she said gently. I know. You could have signed it without that clause. Honored your mother's wish. I did, I said, in a different way. She gave me a long look. You're hoping he stays, aren't you? I didn't answer. I just gathered the papers and shoved them back into my folder. The rain outside had slowed, but the sky still looked bruised, like it wasn't done grieving yet. When I got home that night, the house felt colder than usual. Mom was in her recliner, wrapped in the same blanket she always used. Her eyes locked on a corner of the ceiling where nothing moved. The TV played some old sitcom rerun she didn't understand anymore. I knelt in front of her, took her hands in mine. "Do you remember Elias?" I asked. Her lips parted slightly. She blinked, then, barely audible, "He used to whistle in the kitchen." It hit me like a punch to the chest, not because she remembered, but because it was so specific. I could see it too, him, barefoot, making scrambled eggs, whistling off-key. That was years ago, a whole different life. "Do you want him to come back?" I asked. She didn't answer. Maybe she didn't understand the question. Or maybe she did, and the silence was her answer. I sat with her for a long time, just listening to the hum of the television, holding her fragile hand. And somewhere in that quiet, I started to wonder if this whole thing, this trap I'd laid in legal terms, wasn't really for Elias at all. Maybe it was for me, a way to finally say what I hadn't been able to say when he first left, that I missed him, that I was angry, that I still loved him, even if I didn't know how to forgive him. Days passed. I didn't hear from Elias, not a call, not a message. The silence wasn't new, but this time it echoed in a different way, louder, heavier. I kept checking my phone like an idiot, rereading the same blank screen, waiting for something that didn't want to arrive. Miranda followed up once, asking if I wanted to withdraw the clause, but I told her no. If Elias was going to come back into this family, even just on paper, I needed him to do it in person. I needed to know he was still capable of showing up when it wasn't easy. That weekend, I drove out to the old house, the one we were fighting over without really saying it. The paint on the porch was peeling worse than I remembered. Weeds climbed through the wooden steps. One of the shutters hung loose, swinging when the wind blew just right, but inside, it still smelled like her, like cinnamon and old books and something floral she used to keep in a dish by the window. I walked through the rooms in silence, brushing my fingers along the door frames. My old bedroom was still there, mostly untouched. The twin bed. The dent in the wall from when Elias threw a baseball inside and lied to Dad about it. The closet where I used to sit with a flashlight and read when I didn't want to hear them fighting downstairs. I ended up in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, remembering the mornings when he used to make toast with jelly and sing whatever was stuck in his head. I hated how easily those memories came back. I hated how much I missed him. And that's when I heard a car outside. I froze, footsteps on the porch, the creak of the floorboards. Then the door opened and Elias stepped inside. He looked exhausted. His coat was damp from the rain, hair a little messier than usual. He paused when he saw me standing there, like he wasn't sure if he should come all the way in. "I didn't call," he said. "No," I replied, crossing my arms. "You didn't." He looked around the room. I forgot how small it felt. I didn't say anything. I didn't trust my voice. "I've been thinking," he continued, "about the clause, about what you said, and I realized something." He trailed off, eyes finding the floor. "I'm scared of her." That took me by surprise. He looked up. Not of the illness, of the version of her that might still remember I left, that might hate me for it. I don't know how to sit in a room with someone who could look at me like a stranger. I swallowed hard. "She won't," I said. "She forgets things, but she remembers how to love." He leaned against the doorframe, shoulders slumping. "I don't know if I deserve that." "None of us do," I said, "but it's there anyway." He looked at the contract in his hand. "I'll stay, 6 months, I'll try." And I knew then, this wasn't about the house anymore, it never had been. The first night he moved in, he didn't bring much. A duffel bag, a laptop, a few button-down shirts still on the hangers. I watched him as he walked through the front door like a guest in someone else's story, hesitant, alert, unsure where to place his feet. It was strange, seeing him like that. A man who used to walk these floors barefoot in the middle of the night, now stepping as if the walls might crumble under him. We didn't say much that night. He chose the spare room upstairs, the one that used to be our dad's office. I helped him clean out the dust and the old magazines, even made the bed with the thin quilt Mom had sewn years ago. He didn't thank me, but I didn't expect him to. It wasn't about politeness now, it was about presence. Mom didn't recognize him the first morning. She looked up from her chair when he entered the room and said, "Are you from the church?" He froze. I saw something crack behind his eyes, but he smiled, barely, and sat on the edge of the couch. "No," he said softly. "I'm Elias. I'm your son." She blinked, tilted her head. "Elias is tall," she murmured, as if it were a memory she didn't fully trust. "I used to be," he replied. I stood in the kitchen, pretending to rinse a cup I'd already washed, and listened to them. It was the first time in years I'd heard his voice soften like that. He stayed with her the whole morning, played her music on his phone, old jazz standards she used to hum in the garden. She didn't remember the songs, but I watched her foot tap along with the rhythm anyway. I didn't interrupt. I just watched from the hallway, arms folded, something stirring in my chest I couldn't quite name. Regret, maybe, or longing, or some kind of quiet hope I didn't trust yet. That afternoon he found the photo albums in the hallway closet. I walked into the living room and found him sitting cross-legged on the floor, flipping through pages, his eyes scanning the faces like he was afraid they might fade if he blinked. There were pictures of birthdays, fishing trips, Thanksgiving dinners where we'd all smiled too hard. One photo of him holding me on his shoulders when I was 7. "You remember this?" he asked, not looking up. "Yeah," I said. "I was afraid of the parade balloons. You told me they couldn't reach me up there." He nodded slowly. "I believe that." I sat down beside him. We didn't speak for a while, just turned the pages, the sound of old paper, the kind that smells like dust and warm summers. Finally he asked, "Did she really say she wanted me to have the house?" "She did," I answered. "And it broke her heart when you didn't come home." He closed the album gently. His hands lingered on the cover. "She should have hated me." "She didn't." He looked at me, and for the first time in a very long time his eyes were full, and so were mine. The days that followed moved slowly, like the house itself was holding its breath. Elias tried to fall into a routine. Morning coffee, sitting with Mom while she watched birds through the window. Small walks to the corner store for milk and newspapers she couldn't read anymore. He even fixed the loose shutter on the porch without being asked. But beneath all of that effort, I could see something unraveling in him. He'd linger in the hallway outside her room at night, standing so still I could hear the creak of the floorboards beneath his weight. Sometimes he'd murmur things when he thought no one was listening. Apologies, I think. Half sentences. One night I heard him whisper, "I should have come back when she still knew me." That hurt more than I expected, because he wasn't wrong. She had good days and bad. Sometimes she'd smile when she saw him, like she recognized a feeling even if she couldn't place the face. Other times she'd ask me if the nice man staying in the office needed more towels. He never corrected her, not once. One evening, after I'd cleaned up from dinner, I found him in the garage. He was standing over an old box, the kind taped shut for years, and when he looked up, he had a wrench in one hand and dust on his cheek. "I didn't know you kept this," he said, pointing to the rusted bike inside. "It's yours." He gave a short, breathy laugh. "I thought Dad threw it out after I crashed it into the tree." "He didn't throw anything out. He just hid things until he forgave you." Elias didn't say anything. He sat down on the workbench and stared at the floor. "She doesn't know who I am," he said. "Some days she doesn't even know who I am," I replied. He nodded. "Yeah. But you stayed." There was no accusation in his voice, just resignation, and maybe a little awe. "I stayed because I couldn't leave," I said, "and I left because I didn't know how to stay." We sat in that garage, surrounded by old tools and the smell of oil and wood, and the years between us didn't feel so impossible anymore. Still wide, still aching, but not impassable. He rubbed his face with both hands, then looked at me. "I'm sorry, you know, for everything." I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time I didn't see the brother who vanished. I saw the one who had been scared, who had hurt, who had buried his guilt so deep it had taken this house to dig it out. "I know," I said. "I just needed to hear it." He nodded again. And for the first time since he came back, I believed he meant it. The real shift happened on a Thursday. The morning started like any other. I was in the kitchen scrambling eggs, the coffee brewing beside me. Elias was sitting at the table flipping through the local paper, pretending to care about news that didn't affect him. Mom was in her usual chair by the window, humming something tuneless, and then out of nowhere she said his name. Elias. His head snapped up. I dropped the spatula. She was still looking out the window, her hands folded in her lap, as if she hadn't said anything at all. But we both heard it. Clear. Unmistakable. Elias rose slowly, walked to her side. "Mom." She turned toward him, her eyes sharp for the first time in weeks. "You fixed the porch," he nodded. "Yeah, yesterday. You used to hate that chore. Always made your brother do it." He chuckled, caught off guard. He was better at it. She smiled, small and fleeting. Then, you left. Silence fell over the room like a heavy curtain. I held my breath. Elias looked like he'd been punched. "I know," he whispered. She nodded once, not accusing, just acknowledging. Then just as suddenly her eyes clouded again and she looked down at her hands. "Can I have some tea?" Elias stood there for a long moment, frozen in place. I stepped in. "I'll make it." He sat down slowly beside her, and while I boiled the water I watched them. He took her hand in his. She didn't pull away. That afternoon he didn't go for his usual walk. He stayed with her, telling her stories about the treehouse they'd built, about the time she burned the Thanksgiving turkey and they all pretended not to notice. Some stories she remembered, not in words, but in the way her eyes lit up, or the slight curl of her lips. And later, when she napped, I found him sitting alone on the back steps. He didn't notice me at first. "She remembered me," he said, his voice small. "For a moment," I replied. He nodded slowly. It was enough. The sun was setting behind the trees, the light stretching long and golden across the backyard. I sat beside him. "This house has seen everything," I said, "all of it, and somehow it's still standing." "So are we," he said. I looked over at him, and he met my eyes. Something had shifted in him, a kind of quiet surrender I hadn't seen before. "I think I want to stay longer than 6 months," he said. "Not just for the house." "For her?" "For you." I felt something loosen in my chest, the thing I'd been holding tight for too long. He leaned back against the steps, exhaled deeply. "I still don't know how to make things right," he said. "Maybe it's not about making it right," I said. "Maybe it's just about not running anymore." We sat there as the sun dipped below the trees, and for the first time in years it felt like we were brothers again. A week later, we found the letter. It was tucked inside a cookbook, of all places, wedged between a recipe for cornbread and a handwritten note about pie crust. Elias had been clearing out some of the shelves in the living room when it fell out. A small folded envelope with both our names on the front. I knew the handwriting immediately. It was hers, from before everything slipped. He held it in his hands like it might crumble from the weight of his guilt. "Should we read it together?" he asked. I nodded, and we sat down on the old couch with the faded cushions and sun-bleached arms, the same one we used to leap across like superheroes when we were kids. He opened it carefully, unfolded the page, and began to read aloud. "To Elias and Simon, if you're reading this, it means something has changed. Maybe I've forgotten. Maybe I'm gone. Maybe one of you finally came back. I want to tell you both something I never found the courage to say when I should have. I've made mistakes. I held on too tight when I should have let go, and I let go when I should have held on. Especially with you, Elias. I was angry when you left. Not just for myself, but for Simon. He needed you, and so did I. But I also know that pain comes in strange shapes. It makes us run or fight, or stay quiet when we should speak. Simon, my steady boy. You gave me more than I ever deserved, and I worry that I left too much on your shoulders. You bore the weight I should have carried with you. This house, and it isn't just walls and rooms, it's memory, laughter, pain, and love. So much love, even when we didn't know how to show it. Don't let it end here. Don't let silence be the thing that wins. Talk to each other, tell the truth, And when it's time, forgive. Even if no one says they're sorry. Love always, Mom. When Elias finished, he just stared at the paper, his hands trembling. I didn't speak. I couldn't. The words hit every part of me that had been aching in silence. All the resentment, the exhaustion, the years of wanting something I didn't know how to ask for. She wrote that before she started forgetting, he finally said. Yeah, I whispered. She must have. He placed the letter gently on the coffee table, like it was something sacred. I don't know how to ask for forgiveness, he said. You don't have to, I replied. You just have to stay. He nodded, eyes glistening. I will. For the rest of the evening, we didn't speak much. We just sat side by side, the letter between us, and for the first time since we were kids, I didn't feel like I was carrying everything alone. And neither did he. That night, I dreamt of our childhood, of running barefoot through the yard while Elias chased me with a garden hose, both of us laughing until our stomachs hurt. Mom was on the porch holding a glass of lemonade, telling us to be careful, not because she wanted to stop us, but because she never wanted that joy to break. When I woke up, I could still feel it, the echo of those days before things got heavy. Elias was already awake. I found him in the kitchen slicing fruit for breakfast, the radio humming softly in the background. He looked like someone trying to learn a new rhythm, clumsy but committed. She slept through the night, he said, placing a bowl on the table. Didn't even wake once. That's rare, he nodded. I sat outside her door, just in case. I didn't respond. I just sat down and started eating, surprised by the warmth of the moment. It wasn't perfect. Nothing had been, but it felt human, like something real was growing between us again. Later that day, we took Mom for a drive. She always loved the lake, and though she couldn't say it anymore, I think part of her remembered. When we pulled up to the edge of the water, she stared out the window in complete silence, her hands resting on her lap, her eyes tracing the ripples. Elias got out first and opened her door, helped her out gently, like he'd done it 100 times. We brought a blanket and sat on the grass, letting the breeze move through us. She leaned her head on my shoulder. Elias sat on her other side, legs stretched out, arms behind him, looking at the sky like he was trying to find something he lost up there. She used to bring us here on Sundays, I said. He smiled, always with peanut butter sandwiches. And that radio, she swore, was indestructible. He laughed, a soft, quiet sound. She dropped it in the lake once. Still worked. Mom murmured something, too soft to catch. What was that? Elias asked gently. She looked up at him, eyes cloudy but calm. You two used to fight over who got to sit in the front seat. He blinked, then laughed again, this time with more surprise. Yeah, I remember that. We sat in silence for a while after that, watching ducks move across the water, the sun warming our faces. I was jealous of you, Elias said suddenly, his voice low. After Dad died, you had her. You were strong. I felt like a stranger in my own house. I didn't expect him to say it, but I didn't stop him. I thought if I left I could find myself again, but I just got lost. I turned to him, not angry, just tired. You didn't have to find yourself alone, Elias. You had me. You just didn't ask. I didn't know how. Neither did I, but I stayed. He looked at me, eyes red but dry. Thank you. That was all he said, but it was enough. The wind picked up, lifting the edge of the blanket. Mom was humming again, some forgotten melody from another life. And in that fragile, fleeting moment, we weren't broken, just wounded, but healing. The day Mom fell was the first time I saw Elias panic. It happened early, just after sunrise. I heard the thud from my room, not loud, but unmistakable. By the time I got to the hallway, Elias was already kneeling beside her, trying to help her sit up, his voice shaking. Mom, it's okay. I've got you. She looked confused, frightened, her lips moving without sound. Her hand clutched his wrist like she was trying to anchor herself to something familiar. She slipped, he said when I got there. She was trying to get to the bathroom. I should have. "It's okay," I said, crouching beside him. "Let's get her to bed." She was light, lighter than I remembered, and together we lifted her slowly, gently, like she might break if we moved too fast. Once she was settled, Elias sat on the edge of her bed and held her hand. "I'm calling the nurse," I said. He didn't look at me, just nodded. I stepped out into the hallway, but I heard him. "Please don't leave again," he whispered to her. "I just got here." The nurse came and checked her thoroughly. No major damage, just a bruised hip. But something in her changed after that. She spoke less, ate less, spent more time staring out the window as if waiting for something none of us could give her. Elias barely left her side. He started sleeping in a chair next to her bed, waking at the slightest sound. He read to her from old novels she used to love, even when she didn't respond. He played her favorite records, softly, carefully placing the needle as if the music itself might hurt her. One night, I walked in with a tray of tea and found him holding her hand, eyes closed, head resting against the side of the mattress. "She used to hum this song in the car," he said, eyes still shut. "I remember. I was always annoyed by it, told her to turn it off." I set the tray down. "She never did, though." "No," he said, smiling faintly. "She just hummed louder." We sat there in the quiet, the music filling the space between our regrets. I looked at my brother, really looked, and saw someone who had stopped running. "You've changed," I said. He opened his eyes, met mine. Or maybe I just finally came home. Mom stirred then, her lips parting. Elias leaned in. "What is it, Mom?" She looked up at him, her voice barely audible. "You didn't forget me." Tears filled his eyes instantly, his body trembling with the force of it. "No," he whispered. "Never." She smiled, small, tired, then closed her eyes again. That night, Elias cried. Not the silent kind he'd tried to hide before. He cried openly, like a son who had just been forgiven for something he hadn't been brave enough to name. And I let him. Because I needed it, too. Grief has strange timing. It doesn't knock when you're ready. It arrives in the middle of small, ordinary moments, folding laundry, pouring coffee, tying your shoe. That's how it came for us, too. Mom passed away on a Monday morning. The sky was clear. The light came in soft through the curtains. Elias was reading beside her, a worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird resting in his lap. I had stepped out to pick up her prescriptions, the ones she'd never need again. When I got the call, Elias's voice was hollow. "She's gone, Simon. She just stopped breathing. She didn't even squeeze my hand. I don't remember driving back. I only remember walking into her room and seeing him sitting beside her, still holding her hand, his face soaked in tears, hair disheveled, the book now closed. There were no machines, no last words, no dramatic goodbye, just stillness, and a kind of peace I hadn't expected. We sat in silence, both of us stunned by the quiet of it all. Elias kept whispering to her, telling her how sorry he was, how much he missed her, how grateful he was for those last weeks. I didn't interrupt. The days that followed moved slowly. The funeral was small, just a few neighbors, some old friends from church, a nurse or two who had known her in her final days. Elias and I stood side by side, listening to the pastor speak about grace and memory, while the wind tugged at the edges of our suits. After everyone left, we stayed by the grave. The earth was still fresh, the marker simple, Margaret Hale, 1949, 2025. Beloved mother, keeper of stories. Elias crouched and placed something by the headstone, an old photograph. The three of us at the lake, back when we still believed in forever. "She deserved better," he said. "She had us," I replied. He nodded. Eventually. Back at the house, it felt different. Hollow, yes, but also lighter. There was no more waiting, no more hoping for what couldn't be undone. That night, Elias made dinner. Just spaghetti and garlic bread, nothing special. We ate in the kitchen with the window cracked open, the air warm and full of crickets. Afterward, we sat on the porch in silence, sipping tea. "I don't know what to do next," he admitted. You stay as long as you need, I said. I was thinking. He paused. I might try to fix the house up, properly. Roof, insulation, maybe even repaint the porch. I smiled. You want to keep it? He hesitated. I want it to feel like a home again. And in that moment I realized the contract, the clause, the tension, none of it mattered anymore. He wasn't staying for the house. He was staying for the memory. For her. For us. Weeks passed. Grief settled into the walls like dust, not always visible but always present. Sometimes I'd find Elias standing in Mum's old room, just staring. Other times I'd catch him laughing at something on the radio, only for that smile to fade as quickly as it came. But the house began to breathe again. Elias kept his word. He fixed the back steps, sealed the windows before the first signs of fall crept in. He painted the porch a soft green, like it had been when we were kids, even planted flowers along the edge of the yard, the same kind Mom used to tend. He was building something here, not just repairs, roots. One afternoon, I came home from work to find the living room covered in newspaper and drop cloths. He was on a ladder painting the ceiling. I think it's been yellow since 1982, he said, glancing down. It's part of the charm, I replied. He grinned. It was part of the mildew. That night, we sat on the porch again. The air was cooler now, the kind that makes you want to pull a blanket around your shoulders and listen to the wind in the trees. Elias reached into his coat pocket and handed me a folded paper. What's this? Lawyer dropped it off earlier, the title transfer. I unfolded it. My name had been removed. His was the sole name on the deed now. You could have done this weeks ago, I said. I know. But you waited. He nodded. I needed to be sure that I wasn't just taking something, that I was here for the right reason. I looked down at the paper. Are you? I asked. I think so, he said quietly. But if you asked me to put your name back on it, I would. I didn't answer right away, because it wasn't about the paper. It was about what he'd become. You've already earned it, I said finally. And not because you stayed, because you showed up. He didn't respond, just stared out at the trees, his hands resting on his knees. You know, I said after a while, Mom would have loved this porch now. She always hated that loose step, he replied. We both chuckled. It was soft but real. Then I asked something I hadn't dared to before. Do you think she forgave us? He turned to me, brow furrowed. Us? For not saying what needed to be said. For waiting until it was too late. He thought for a long moment, then said, I think she forgave us a long time ago. We were the ones who took longer to forgive ourselves. That landed deep. We sat in that silence for a while, not uncomfortable, not strained, just still. And for the first time since that contract slid across the lawyer's desk, I realized something. It had never been about ownership. It had always been about presence. Autumn settled in fully, slow and golden. The trees around the house caught fire with color, leaves cascading in soft waves across the yard. The scent of dried earth, firewood, and something warm filled the air. I'd never noticed how beautiful the town looked this time of year. Maybe I just hadn't allowed myself to. Elias had started baking, badly, but it didn't matter. I walked into the kitchen one morning to find the smoke alarm blaring, and him standing there with burnt muffins and a sheepish grin. She used to make these, he said, waving the charred tray. Mine taste more like guilt. I laughed, really laughed, and helped him throw them out. We made a second batch together, this time carefully following her old handwritten recipe, smudged and faded from years of flour and memory. It felt like she was there with us, somewhere in the cinnamon and cracked eggshells. One afternoon we took out her boxes, the ones she kept in the attic, full of things she didn't have room for in the drawers of daily life. Letters, clippings, birthday cards we'd forgotten we gave her. There was a little velvet box tucked at the bottom. Inside was a bracelet, delicate, silver, engraved with our initials, S+E. She wore this all the time when we were kids, Elias whispered. I thought she lost it. She never lost anything. She just waited for the right time to give it back. We sat there, cross-legged on the attic floor, passing things between us like memories had weight. I found one letter addressed to Elias, unopened. He held it for a long time before tearing it gently at the fold. It was dated 4 years after he left, just a few lines written in her hand. "I know you think you've disappointed me, but you haven't. You were scared. I was too. Just come home when you're ready. That's all I ever wanted." He didn't cry. He just held it to his chest, his eyes closed as if she had written it yesterday. Later that night, I heard him on the phone with someone. He didn't say much, but I caught one sentence as I passed by his room. "I'm not running anymore." He didn't see me standing there, I just kept walking. Back on the porch, I sat with the bracelet in my palm, the metal cool against my skin. So much of our life had been built around waiting, for apologies, for explanations, for time to rewind itself. But now we were building forward, not perfectly, but together. Winter came early that year. The first snow fell quietly in the night, blanketing the porch steps, the trees, the roof of the old house in stillness. I woke to the soft crunch of footsteps outside my window and found Elias shoveling the driveway before the sun had fully risen, his breath a cloud in the morning air. I watched him for a long time, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to. That was new. Later that afternoon, we built a fire in the living room, the kind Mum used to insist on even when it wasn't that cold. She said it made the house feel less alone. Elias placed the old blanket over the couch, the one she always used, and we sat in silence, staring into the flames. He held the bracelet in his hand. "I was going to leave it on her grave," he said. But something stopped me. She wouldn't have wanted that. He nodded. "I think she wanted us to have it together." He reached across the space between us and placed it in my palm. "Keep it," he said. "You earned it." "No," I replied. "We did." We sat like that for a while, two men carrying the same name, the same scars, the same ache that time didn't quite erase. But something in us had changed. He had come back, and I had let him. That night, I wrote a letter. I didn't know who it was for, not really. Maybe for Mum, maybe for Elias, maybe for the version of myself that had stayed all those years, waiting without knowing what I was waiting for. It wasn't long, just a few lines. You don't need to be perfect to come home. You just need to stop running. I left it on the kitchen table. The next morning it was gone. In its place was a cup of coffee and a note written on the back of a grocery list. "I'm not running anymore." Elias stayed, not just in the house, but in the moments. The quiet ones, the hard ones, the ones we used to run from. And me? I forgave him, not because he asked, but because holding on hurt more than letting go. The house is still old, still creaky, still filled with ghosts in the corners of photographs and drawers filled with forgotten keys. But it's also full of warmth now, of meals made badly but with care, of laughter that doesn't need to be perfect, of a kind of love that took the long way home. She was right. It was never about the house. It was always about showing up, even when it's too late for apologies, even when forgiveness is silent. Especially then. If this story moved something inside you, if it reminded you of someone, or of something left unsaid, I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done in his place? Have you ever had to forgive someone in your family without ever hearing "I'm sorry"? Don't leave without sharing your story. Your comment might be the one that helps someone else find the strength to forgive too. And if this touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story. One is coming up on your screen right now. Let it play. You won't want to miss it.